I'm joined now by Eric Brock. He's a portfolio manager for the $4 billion Clough Capital Fund. He's based in Boston and joins us here. Now, you run the Asian Long Short Fund, about $50 million of the fund. Tell me, how has the disaster in Japan affected your investments? Can you really have this kind of disaster in the world's third largest economy and not have reverberations?
No, there's absolutely reverberations. We had some exposure to Japan, largely in the capital goods sector, as well as the technology sector, and obviously our portfolio was impacted. But there is still value. We were investing in Japan with a longer-term story, and that longer-term story is still in place. It's complicated now by getting the logistics networks back up, the transportation networks, rebuilding the roads and the ports, restaffing ports, as well as sorting out the power situation. So, but those will be solved. They'll take a couple of months, 2-3 months to get more visibility. But they're very solvable problems.
Now, how much of the portfolio is in Japan?
Today it's fairly low. It was higher a couple of weeks ago, so we have reduced exposure as we tried
since the disaster.
Yes, as we try to assess what the bigger picture risks are. Although, as I said, information that we're receiving now, the situation looks far more stable than it was. So risks will be receding, and now I think the attention in the markets will be focused on what the recovery looks like and what the slope of that recovery is.
Warren Buffett is often a cheerleader in times of crisis, right? And he said in Japan that he's using this as perhaps a buying opportunity, or he would if he wanted to be more active in Japan. You don't feel that way?
No, I do. I think the market is going to present opportunities. I just don't think it's going to run away from us.
2 to 3 month period.
Yeah, I think you have an opportunity to really take a reasoned look at the market, see what because some companies will have production facilities that will prove to be more difficult to bring back. So so we have some time. I don't think the market's going to run away from us. In the meantime, I think there's better opportunities in Asia, particularly in China.
Yeah, well, talk to me about some of those opportunities, because how will it be impacted at all by Japan? And do you worry about this question that continues to pop up about China overheating?
No, well, there's two parts to that. So firstly, there is some complications, obviously, supply chains to China, so that's going to have an impact. Although I think they'll work through that, and it might be again that 2 to 3 month period. But there's alternative suppliers in Taiwan, domestic production bases in China, which will actually benefit to a certain extent from the destruction of production facilities in Japan. So China, I think, is relatively well positioned post that crisis. And in terms of overheating, we do see some inflation pressures in China. I think the authorities there have been fairly well out in front of the issue. And although inflation seems to be intensifying over the last, say, 3 to 6 months, so has a policy tightening. And inflation is always a lagging indicator. Our take is that it's likely that over the next, say, 2-3 months, we're going to see the peak in inflationary pressure, which will be a significant catalyst for the stock market in China, because it does take the threat of a super aggressive central bank tightening cycle off the table.
But still, that wait and see for the next 2 to 3.
No, I think you can start building positions in China, particularly in the domestic-oriented sectors.
The consumer goods.
Consumer, exactly. The consumer sector.
With Japan, the question on that long-term rebuilding issue is they already have such high debt to GDP levels, so something like 200%.
Yeah.
So how do they afford to rebuild in a way that's not going to add on more burden? Yeah,
it is. It's becoming increasingly difficult, I think, for the Japanese government to finance the fiscal imbalances. So I think that's something as an investor you have to keep your eye on.
Would you pull back from government bonds?
I don't think there's the Japanese government bonds offer an attractive return here. So yeah, I don't think that particularly a global investor really needs to focus any of their portfolio there.
All right, Eric, thanks so much for giving us your read.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Good to talk to you. Eric Brock of Clough Capital.